this is Dana Bowman. Welcome to another fabulous episode of Thyroid Refresh video podcast.
And I'm Jenny Mahar, and we are here today with my friend Erin Switalski, who is the Executive Director of Women's Voices for the Earth. And they're an amazing nonprofit who's working to eliminate toxic chemicals that harm women's health from products. So really important work. And as we all know, thyroid health is significantly impacted by toxic chemicals. So this is a really big topic. We're here today talking with Erin about feminine products, guys. We're going there. So
we're doing it.
Get comfortable. This is going to be fun and really, really interesting, helpful information. So
it's super important. And it's a topic that people don't want to talk about too often. So we're doing it.
Well, and we're at a place, I feel like, where there's so much new, information for people, new options, I guess, for people. And this is really kind of interesting. Dan and I were inspired before we talked to you today, Erin, to look a little bit into the history of, feminine products, because we started to wonder, what did people used to use, right? And it turns out that, like way, way back, we're talking like 10th century, people used whatever they could find. I mean, it might be moss, clumps of grass. We even read lint wrapped around a stick. I mean, yeah. It's incredible, how resourceful people had to be. And then, in the 1700s, people used typically like old rags and things. That's where that saying comes from. And they would, hand wash them and reuse them. Women who grew up on, or who were living on farms, would use things like sheepskins. Dana, you read about some interesting other alternatives with those reusable cheesecloth bundles, right?
Yeah, they would put cotton inside of them, and then they would replace the cotton, which I thought was really brilliant for the cheesecloths. I just thought that was a very smart way to do it. They were very industrious in the way they came up with things. And then, let's see, we also read about the first commercially made sanitary pads by Johnson & Johnson in 1896. And what is so, for me, fascinating and kind of it hits home today, it didn't catch on back then because women were embarrassed, I guess is the word, to go in and kind of announce that they were on their periods, or it was their, time of the month. And so they didn't want to be seen buying them. So it didn't catch on. And I remember Jenny and I were talking earlier too, as well. I remember seeing my aunt. This might date me a little bit. Ooh, I don't want to say this. No, my aunt wore the belt, the belt. And, with the sanitary pad that you didn't, reuse or whatever. But it was amazing, all the different ways that women are so ingenuitive in dealing with it. I just think it's brilliant.
Well, and there's been so many different things over the years. The first tampon didn't really even come into play until 1929. That first tampon was made by Tampax. And that was sort of the beginning of things becoming disposable. Like the sanitary fashion in the 30s kind of became anything disposable. But prior to that, it's really interesting that everything was reusable, right? And probably a little bit less toxic for our bodies. And that's why we really wanted to talk to Erin today, because that's a really, really big topic. And also to kind of talk about maybe some of the like cultural stigmas that come into play here as a factor. Like I know when I first heard about menstrual cups, like the Diva cup, I was like, oh, I just can't even think about that. I just culturally, I was just like, no way. I could never see myself using one. Now, that's what I use is it's a Moonette, it's like the Diva cup, but there's all these other great alternatives out there now. And I think we're at a point where we're sort of coming full circle because we're more conscious of all the environmental toxins. We're conscious about the the environmental impact of those toxins that go into making those, how they affect our bodies. And we're coming back to things that are reusable, that happen to be, less toxic. So,
I was just going to say, I'm really excited too, because I have a daughter, and,
right.
To be kind of, and so do you, Erin, to be, riding this wave and seeing this all come full circle and possibly be more, beneficial and healthy for my daughter. I think it's fabulous. Also, I was going to say, when I first started using my Diva Cup, I think it's been about 4 or 5 years, my family and friends, they weren't very receptive to my idea, and still really aren't. So for those of you that are my friends and family watching, I use the Diva Cup. It's lots of fun.
It's great to have an open mind, and there's other, alternatives out there that we're seeing now too, not just the reusable silicone menstrual cups, but there's lots of organic pads and tampons that are coming out now, various brands making, chemical free or, chemical reduced, maybe disposable products. And then also we're seeing reusable organic pads and things that just like the olden days, you rinse out and put them through the wash and reuse them again. So, Erin, can we kind of go into like the reasons why people might want to start paying attention to some of the new, less toxic alternatives that are out there?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you guys so much for doing this podcast. I think this topic of, feminine care, feminine hygiene is one that has been kind of under the covers for a long time. And so it's exciting to be able to talk about this. And like you said, Jenny, there are a lot of cultural stigmas around this topic that still exist. And so the more we can just shed, some light on this topic from all different angles, the better off we're going to be. I was so fascinated to listen to your history of what women used to use, because I actually had not looked into that, and it just struck me as so interesting that women would rather, they were using rags or grass, whatever they could find, and were interested in the Johnson & Johnson product when it first came out because of that stigma. And what it made me think of is that I think right now, some of the mainstream products that are out there isn't any real regulation or oversight of these products and what chemicals are put into them. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there really just hasn't, in general, been much conversation around this. And nobody's really been asking the question about what chemicals are safe for use in contact with the vagina and mucous membranes and vulvar tissue. And so it's just that those stigmas have really real world implications for women's health. And so it's really fascinating to be able to erase some of those stigmas. And I think by doing so, I think we can erase some of the potential health problems that can be associated with these products. So
that's such a good point,
Yeah.
Just the power of we need to talk about our vaginas, ladies, like let's shed some light on this topic. And so we're not, going to be subjected to these harmful substances and can, maybe make some change happen there, or at least educate ourselves and each other.
And it's not a shameful topic,
Right.
And that's the other thing we have to kind of get past. I know it's a personal topic, but it's not something to be ashamed of. And I know women were treated differently for many, many years and hundreds of years ago. Some good, some not so good. And, and you feel funny and you don't want people to know, which I understand, but it's one of those things that does need to be talked about, shed some light on. So we're talking about vaginas today.
Well, I don't know. Have you guys read that book, The Red Tent?
I have not read that.
It is so fantastic. And anybody out there who's read it knows what I'm talking about. But it's about biblical times. And, when a woman was on her period, she would go to the red tent. And that's where you would stay for the duration of, your menstrual cycle. And, there's been many a times I've thought, man, I could really go for like some red tent action right about now, just getting horizontal with my gal pals, nobody bug me,
bring back the ceremony around,
right?
Maybe somebody make a batch of cookies or something.
Yeah,
but I mean, on the other hand, the other part of it was like this shunning of the whole thing. And it just, there are, as Erin, so aptly pointed out, there's some real implications for that, about that, for our health,
Yeah. Well, maybe I can, I'd love to tell you guys a little bit about what we call our Detox the Box campaign. And that is essentially, so our organization, Women's Voices for the Earth, we're working to eliminate toxic chemicals, and we've been focusing on products that most intimately impact women. And so we had been focusing on personal care products, cosmetics, professional hair products, cleaning products for a number of years. And then we started getting inquiries from women who said, gosh, how do I know if my tampons are safe? How do I know if my pads are safe? And we started looking into it and realized, gosh, we don't know, actually. In fact, we don't know, because first of all, there's no ingredient disclosure required for tampons or pads or menstrual devices. So essentially, companies can put whatever they want into those products. And then we also noticed there's this whole breadth of other products that are really kind of on the rise, these feminine cleansing products. So you can think of douches and washes, feminine washes and feminine wipes and sprays, and there's feminine deodorants. There's all of these things, which most of those are marketed around a problem that doesn't exist. They're marketed because they have made women feel shameful about the vagina, or like your vagina must smell, so you need to use these wipes and these sprays. And have really sort of manufactured a problem and then created this solution in the form of a cleansing product to solve the problem.
Right. I wanted to ask you really quickly, have you heard about vagina facials?
No, I have not.
Yes. It's an LA thing. So once we get off, you're going to need to Google that, because I'm thinking to myself, how does this go down? Right? I'm trying to figure out exactly how that works. But also, is there part of that, like you were just saying, the smell or whatever people are saying, so you must need to do this in order to keep it a certain way. And that's not the case. It's like a self-cleaning oven, it's like a really healthy way. It's a really smart, brilliant way that the body does what it needs to do. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, one of the things we like to tell people is that, your vagina is okay just the way it is, and vaginas smell differently. If you're actually concerned about a smell, then you should go to the doctor and see if there's some kind of underlying problem or infection that needs to be looked at. But don't buy a wipe or a feminine spray to cover up the problem. Right. And what that usually does is just cause more irritation, because a lot of these wipes and sprays contain a whole host of toxic chemicals. Some of them contain things like parabens, which are oftentimes used as a preservative. They've been linked to endocrine disruption. And so to me, it's just absolutely crazy to think that chemicals linked to hormone disruption, to really causing problems with your reproductive system, would be used in a product that you're putting into direct contact with reproductive organs. It doesn't make any sense at all. And we see a lot of examples of this. We see in certain douches, we've seen the use of dyes that are actually, according to the FDA, they're not supposed to come into contact with mucous membranes. And so that they've typically applied that to like cosmetic products that you might use on your face or something. But the reality is your vagina is full of mucous membranes. And if you're taking a feminine wash and putting it on your vagina like you're supposed to do per the directions, then you're going to come into contact with the mucous membranes. And this is something that's just completely slipping through the cracks.
Wow.
Yeah, those are just a couple of examples. You know, I think the endocrine disrupting chemicals are particularly worrisome. And then there's a whole host of irritants and allergens and potential carcinogens, all kinds of things in there that just have really, you know, it just does not seem necessary at all to be put into these products.
And you're saying that those chemicals, many of them are not safety tested?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We have a woefully under-regulated chemical management system in the United States. So those feminine cleansing products actually fall under, they fall under the category of cosmetics, which are regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. But the law that actually oversees the regulation of cosmetics really hasn't been updated since 1938. And really, it's a page and a half long if you actually pulled up the law and looked at it, which is crazy.
Oh, wow.
And so we restrict in the US, about a dozen chemicals, whereas in Europe, for example, in the European Union, they restrict over 1,100 chemicals for use in cosmetics and personal care products.
We're way behind the times.
We're way behind. And you know, and that goes broadly for cosmetics. That's feminine cleansing products fall under that. But for the most part, those products are, because of the stigma around them, they're being even less looked at than other cosmetic products.
Right, because nobody wants to talk about it.
Right.
Nobody wants to talk about it, and they don't want to say the V word. One thing that I think is interesting, though, is, you know, they did have the late 70s, the toxic shock syndrome.
Yes.
I'm surprised that didn't spawn a bunch of research. The fact of the matter is there's not a lot of research into, okay, we know that X chemical can do this to the endocrine system and that kind of thing. But what we were talking about earlier before we got on the air was that you were saying there aren't any real studies about what this chemical does via a tampon to the body. There's not enough study. There are not any studies, right?
Yeah, there's no specific study that we have seen that does that specific thing. We have asked companies are they doing that kind of research and testing when they develop the product. We have yet to see a company give us that research. But overall, you know, I think that research really doesn't exist. And there's two really fascinating things about that. So one is there's actually this fascinating research that pharmaceutical companies have done, because they're interested in looking at like vaginal distribution of drugs, like drug delivery, basically, some kind of suppository. Because what they have found that certain drugs, and in particular drugs that are like endocrine like estradiol hormones, are actually distributed 10 to 80 times more efficiently through the vagina than even if taken orally. So just that bit of information alone tells you that, okay, like the whole vagina is a really powerful system, and it can get stuff through the body and into the blood really, really quickly, like potentially quicker than if we swallowed something. And so
it's super absorbent. It's super absorbent.
It's incredibly absorbent. I mean, it's the vagina. It's a superpower, right?
Right.
So, like, it's amazing at everything, but it's also amazing at absorbing toxic chemicals. And so we need to be really, really diligent about making sure that even the tiniest amounts of toxics are not in products that we put into direct contact with those mucous membranes and with the other parts of the vagina.
And I'm going to go one step further really quickly, if you don't mind. I'm just going to jump in. What about toilet paper?
Oh.
That's a great question. And we have not done any particular studies on toilet paper. I haven't seen a lot of studies on that. But, it's the same kind of concepts, what are people using to make the toilet paper? Is it just cotton? Is it organic cotton? What else are they adding to make it all wind up and stick together?
And to have the scents, to have the,
Yes.
cotton fresh, whatever spring scent and that kind of thing, and so,
Right.
I mean, I'm thinking to myself, toilet paper shouldn't have any chemicals.
And scents, that's such an important point. Like, just don't use scented products. Just avoid scented products as much as you can, because we know the least about fragrance chemicals. So if you see the word fragrance on something, that fragrance is just a mixture of a whole bunch of chemicals together, and they're not disclosing what specifically the chemical makeup of that fragrance is.
And they don't have to.
Different ingredients.
They don't have to, right?
No. Right now,
Wow.
fragrance is mostly protected by trade secrets. Although we did just pass legislation in California that's going to require disclosure of cleaning product ingredients, including fragrance. So we're starting to see that
Wow.
change. And this is one thing we're really pushing for in the feminine hygiene industry is just, if you're going to use fragrance, you need to be really transparent about all the ingredients that make up your fragrance. But for the most part, we're sort of saying, well, don't make scented pads and tampons. There's just no reason for that.
Right.
Not at all.
Well, I've got all kinds of questions and
Right.
red flags going off right now, right? I mean, and we kind of covered the wipes and the washes and things. And I'm dying to know about tampons and what specifically, knowing what you know about those environmental toxins. This is something we insert into our bodies that comes into contact with this, it's just a mucous membrane that is, you said, possibly even more absorbent than our mouths.
Depending on what chemicals, depending on what kind of chemical is coming into contact. And that's the thing is, shouldn't we have that research to know, to better understand that these chemicals that are making up this product that we're inserting into this very absorbent tissue that functions in this very unique way that other body parts don't, we need to have research around that, not just, oh, well, this works fine when we have it in a lotion on our skin. That's a very different organ than the vagina. And so that's a key question that we're working on. One of the things that we're supporting is a piece of legislation by Representative Carolyn Maloney, who is out of New York. And actually, she has introduced a bill for about 10 years. And it originally was designed as a bill to address toxic shock syndrome. So this was the concern. We need to understand why people are getting toxic shock syndrome from tampons. And a few years ago, we contacted her and said, hey, this is a much bigger problem. There's tampons, there's pads, there's washes, wipes, sprays, this whole world of feminine products. And so she really expanded the scope of her bill it would require the National Institutes of Health to do research into all the additives used in these menstrual and feminine cleansing products.
I'm thinking we hashtag that and post it and get it out there or something, right? Because, the amazing vagina hashtag, I don't know, but something needs to be, right? It needs to be circling around like all these other things when you put a hashtag in front of it does, because that's amazing that there's this bill out there that that's crazy. I'm ready for it to pass.
Absolutely. And it's time. She even said in the last year, we did a rally in DC at the Capitol with Representative Maloney and Representative Meng, who has introduced a companion bill that would require disclosure of ingredients in tampons and pads and other menstrual devices. And Carolyn Maloney was just saying, oh, this is so great. I've been, here in Congress for over a decade, and nobody on the floor wants to talk about menstrual products because there's a lot of white men working in Congress here and not a lot of women, and I just can't get this bill out of committee. So I think, it's also the timing is much more ripe for these conversations, and it's just part of a broader women's rights focus now too.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you guys are doing so much amazing work, Erin, at Women's Voices for the Earth. We always kind of like to leave our listeners with some action items, some actionable things that they can do to help protect their thyroid health. And that's what this whole conversation is about. Really, it's our thyroid health. It's, protecting ourselves from cancer. It's protecting our reproductive systems. It's protecting our children's health, all of that. So, aside from, talking about our vaginas more,
it's always good fun.
And talking to our girlfriends and our moms and our sisters and our aunts and our daughters, about this stuff and airing it out and putting some sunlight on it. What are some other things people can do to kind of help
with their health,
create more protection for ourselves? Right. Are there resources you would recommend, or?
Absolutely. So on our website, which is womensvoices.org, our campaign is called Detox the Box. So #DetoxTheBox. And
I like that one. Very clever.
It's a little double entendre there.
Yep.
But yeah, we have resources. So we have lists of our Hall of Shame products, which has some specific information around certain chemicals found in certain feminine care products that you will want to avoid. And we also have links to action alerts that you can take to support these pieces of legislation. I would just urge people to sign up on our list so that you can get just the e-news, which are e-newsletters every 3 weeks. It's not too much. And get engaged with local actions that are happening. We're going to be rolling out later this year what we are calling our Detox the Box house parties. And this is going to be a super fun tool where we're going to have all this information packed into a friendly toolkit so you can host a party with your friends and talk about your vagina, learn about this stuff together, and then take some action so that we can create the momentum that we need to start to change the systems that allow these chemicals into the products in the first place. Because the truth is, we can go to the store and we can buy safe products, and that's what we're all doing in the interim, because it's also important to support the companies that are trying to do things right. But we ultimately need to change the laws and systems so that we can just be sure that everybody is protected in this, just for everyone, for our health, for our daughter's health, for our mother's health, for everybody's health.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Amen.
All right. Well, you guys heard it here. Womensvoices.org. Sounds like you guys have amazing resources. I know we've been looking at a number of them ourselves. We're going to be featuring an article, Q&A with Erin on our website here soon that will shed a little bit more light into some of the specifics of, feminine care toxins and things. And we're also currently working on a guide of alternatives, giving people a place to go to look for different alternatives.
But one thing you can absolutely do right now is not use a wipe. I mean, one of those,
the wipes,
those wipes, just don't use them.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. And those are more and more common. I feel like I hear more and more people talking about using those, and yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And Jenny, I forgot to mention, we do also have a list of business partners on our website. So companies that are committed to transparency of ingredients and working to make the safest products they can.
Right. And yes, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. Cause with you guys being a nonprofit, you can't really, advertise certain products. Right. But
yeah, we don't endorse anything in particular, but we do have partnerships with companies that align in terms of values.
Awesome.
That's great.
All right, guys. Well, lots of good resources. And Erin, thank you so much for being here with us today and for talking about vaginas with us. It's been awesome and so enlightening, a little bit concerning, disturbing, but also this is how we get empowered, guys. And this is how we take care of our bodies and create change for the better for all of us and for our health and for everyone's health. So we really appreciate you being here with us on Thyroid Refresh video podcast. And thank you, Dana. And we hope you guys will come by and check out some of those resources. We'll have them as soon as they're ready. We'll have them in the post with this video podcast.
Don't forget the hashtags, detox the box and the amazing vagina. Yay! Okay, thanks for joining us on Thyroid Refresh video podcast. Bye, guys.